Maple Creek Estates appeared perfect from every angle. Sunlight filtered through rows of mature oak trees that lined pristine streets where identical two-story colonials stood in perfect formation. After 15 years leading the Graffiti Crimes unit downtown, I had seen the worst of urban destruction: buildings defaced, historical monuments ruined, neighborhoods terrorized by territorial tags. I chose this suburb specifically as my sanctuary, a place where order prevailed and chaos remained firmly outside the neighborhood boundaries. My neighbors knew me only as Detective Sanders, a police officer who worked downtown. Few knew the full extent of my role as chief investigator of graffiti crimes, a specialized position that had me testifying in court against gang members one day and consulting with international art theft experts the next. Here in Maple Creek, I cherish the anonymity, the chance to leave work behind and enjoy the seasonal rhythm of suburban life: summer block parties, fall decoration contests, and winter light displays that transformed our street into a fairytale scene. The Homeowners Association maintained this perfection with ruthless efficiency. Every Friday, a thin woman with ash blonde hair styled in an immaculate bob would walk the neighborhood, clipboard in hand, meticulously documenting infractions. Karen Westfield had served as HOA president for 15 consecutive years, her perpetual frown deepening with each passing season. Grass exceeding 3 inches, unauthorized flower varieties, incorrectly positioned garbage bins, no violation escaped her notice. Most residents complied without question. Those who challenged the rules quickly learned that Karen possessed both surprising political connections and a vindictive memory. The previous board treasurer who questioned financial decisions found himself battling mysterious code violations weekly until he eventually sold his house and moved away. The lesson was clear. In Maple Creek Estates, peace came at the price of absolute conformity. The delicate balance shifted when the Martinez family moved into the blue colonial 3 doors down from mine. Maria Martinez was a pediatric nurse, her husband Carlos an architectural engineer. Their son Miguel, a bright-eyed 12-year-old with a determined smile, had been wheelchair-bound since birth due to cerebral palsy. I watched from my porch as they transformed their standard-issue home to accommodate his needs. First came the modest wheelchair ramp replacing the concrete front steps, a masterpiece of understated design that Carlos had clearly engineered to blend seamlessly with the existing architecture. Next appeared sensory-friendly garden elements: wind chimes that helped Miguel navigate his front yard, textured stepping stones for therapeutic touch experiences, and raised garden beds that allowed him to cultivate flowers from his wheelchair. Even from a distance, I noticed Karen Westfield slowing her pace when passing their house, her pen hovering over her clipboard, eyes narrowing as she assessed each modification. The Martinez family had secured proper permits from the city, but I recognized the calculating look in Karen's eyes. The chess pieces were moving into position for a conflict that would shatter our neighborhood's carefully maintained veneer of perfection. From my peripheral position, I observed the subtle tension building, entirely unaware of how deeply involved I would soon become in the most serious case of my career, one located not in the graffiti-covered alleys downtown, but right here on my own peaceful suburban street. The first official violation notice appeared on the Martinez family door exactly 17 days after they completed their accessibility modifications. I happened to be retrieving my mail when Karen marched up their freshly poured concrete ramp, her heels clicking against the surface with military precision. The paper she affixed to their door was bright yellow, impossible to miss, and deliberately humiliating. The architectural harmony guidelines clearly state that all exterior structural elements must maintain aesthetic consistency. Karen, announced loudly when Maria opened the door, as if performing for an audience rather than addressing a single homeowner. Your ramp violates Code 7.3 regarding front entrance uniformity. Maria clutched the notice, confusion evident on her face. But we submitted the designs to both the city and the HOA Architectural Committee. We received approval 2 months ago. Karen adjusted her designer sunglasses, looking past Maria toward the interior of their home. The committee may have been overly lenient. As president, I have final review authority. She tapped a manicured finger against her clipboard. You have 14 days to restore the original steps. I pretended to sort through my mail while observing the interaction. Carlos joined his wife at the door, architectural plans in hand. These modifications are protected under the Americans with Disabilities Act, he explained calmly. Our son requires wheelchair access. Karen smiled thinly. The HOA bylaws predate your purchase agreement. Perhaps you should have selected a more appropriate neighborhood for your specific situation. The emphasis she placed on those words carried unmistakable disdain. 3 more violation notices followed that week. The wind chimes that helped Miguel navigate his sensory garden were deemed excessive noise pollution. The textured stepping stones were labeled unauthorized landscaping elements. The raised garden beds apparently violated height restrictions for exterior structures. At the monthly community meeting, the Martinez family respectfully requested accommodation. Karen orchestrated their defeat masterfully, calling for a show of hands on each modification while making pointed comments about property values. Neighbors who had previously welcomed the family with casseroles and friendship now averted their eyes, their hands remaining firmly in their laps during the vote. The pattern became impossible to ignore. While the Morgan family on Sycamore Lane maintained a collection of garden gnomes clearly violating the same ordinances, they received no citations. The Thompsons had installed a basketball hoop with similar concrete footings to the Martinez ramp, yet Karen deemed it acceptable community recreation equipment. One Tuesday afternoon, I observed Karen from my home office window as she photographed the Martinez property. She circled their modest home like a predator, measuring tape extended, muttering about standards and precedents. When Miguel appeared at his bedroom window, Karen deliberately turned her back, continuing her documentation as if he were invisible. My professional detachment began to crack. After 20 years in law enforcement, I prided myself on neutrality, on following evidence rather than emotion. But watching Miguel's face fall as he observed Karen documenting his home for yet another violation awakened something protective in me. The discrimination was no longer subtle. It was targeted, deliberate, and increasingly personal. That evening, I noticed Maria removing the colorful wind chimes that Miguel loved, tears streaming down her face as she dismantled the sensory elements that had given her son independence in navigating their garden. Carlos worked silently beside her, replacing the textured stepping stones with standard concrete pavers that matched the rest of the neighborhood. Their conformity came at the cost of their son's accessibility. Throughout the neighborhood, curtains twitched as residents observed their compliance, relieved that Karen's attention remained focused elsewhere. What none of us realized then was that compliance would never be enough. Karen Westfield had found her target and her campaign was just beginning. The Martinez family could remove every modification, paint their house the exact approved shade of blue, and maintain their lawn to golf course perfection. But they had committed the one unforgivable sin in Karen's eyes. They were different. And in Maple Creek Estates, difference was not tolerated. The scream shattered our neighborhood's early morning silence. It was 6:17 a.m., I remember checking my watch instinctively, a habit from years of documenting crime scenes. The sound propelled me from my kitchen table, coffee forgotten as I sprinted down the street toward its source. Other neighbors emerged cautiously onto their porches, but none moved with purpose. They watched, but they did not act. Maria Martinez knelt on the concrete before her front door, arms wrapped around herself as if physically holding her body together. Her wails had transformed into a low, keening sound that raised the hair on my arms. Carlos stood frozen behind her, one hand gripping the doorframe for support. When I reached them, I saw what had broken this strong family so completely. Across their white front door in dripping crimson spray paint was a single word: freak. The paint was still wet, droplets sliding slowly downward like tears of blood. My training activated automatically as I assessed the scene. Montana Gold brand paint, almost certainly the shock Kent blood red color based on the distinctive hue. Applied approximately 4 or 5 hours earlier, given the partial drying pattern. Amateur application technique, likely a first-time vandal based on the inconsistent pressure and drip patterns. Do not touch anything, I instructed gently, dropping into my professional voice. Let me get my kit. I jogged back to my house, retrieved my field investigation bag from the trunk of my car, and returned to find Miguel had joined his parents. The boy sat motionless in his wheelchair at the edge of the ramp, staring at the hateful word defacing his home. Tears tracked silently down his face, but his expression reflected something worse than sadness: resignation. This 12-year-old child had already learned to expect cruelty from the world. The realization ignited a quiet fury within me that I carefully contained behind my professional demeanor. Mr. and Mrs. Martinez, I am not just a detective, I explained, pulling on latex gloves. I specialize in graffiti crimes for the county police department. With your permission, I would like to document this scene properly. Carlos looked at me with desperate hope. You can find who did this. I nodded, already photographing the spray pattern from multiple angles. Graffiti has identifiable characteristics as unique as fingerprints. The application style, paint choice, time of day, these all tell a story. Neighbors had gathered in small clusters along the street, maintaining a careful distance from the crime scene. Their expressions registered shock and dismay, but none approached to offer comfort to the Martinez family. Fear of association was evident in their body language. Everyone suspected who might be responsible, and no one dared stand against her. Do you have security cameras? I asked, knowing that most Maple Creek residents had installed basic systems after a series of package thefts the previous year. Maria nodded, wiping tears with the back of her hand. Carlos installed them when we moved in. There is one above the garage and another by the back door. Within an hour, I had collected paint samples, measured spray patterns, and obtained access to their security system. I promised to review the footage immediately and report anything I found to both the Martinez family and the police department officially. What I did not tell them was that my position gave me discretion in how such cases were handled, and I already suspected this case would require careful navigation. The Martinez family retreated inside their violated home while Carlos covered the slur with a tarp. Miguel looked back at me once before his father wheeled him inside. His eyes held a question I could not yet answer. Would anyone protect him? That evening, I sat alone in my home office reviewing the security footage. The night vision camera above the Martinez garage had captured a grainy but unmistakable sequence at 2:13 a.m. A figure in dark clothing approached from the side of the house, face partially obscured by a hooded sweatshirt. They moved with nervous energy, glancing repeatedly over their shoulder while retrieving a can from a tote bag. The spray painting took less than 30 seconds, the perpetrator backing away to admire their work before hurrying off camera. I enhanced the footage, focusing on the moment the figure turned to leave. The streetlight caught their profile for just 3 frames, enough to confirm what I had suspected from the moment I saw the vandalism. The distinctive bob haircut, the familiar posture, the characteristic way she checked over her right shoulder, then left. Karen Westfield had committed the very crime I had dedicated my career to fighting. The revelation transformed everything. This was no longer just a neighborhood dispute or HOA overreach. This was a targeted hate crime against a disabled child by the very person entrusted with maintaining community standards. My professional commitment to justice fused with personal outrage, creating a resolve that would reshape our entire community. Karen Westfield had no idea who she was dealing with, but she was about to find out. My home office transformed into an operations center within 48 hours. Years of building cases against graffiti crews, tagging rings, and vandalism syndicates had taught me the value of methodical evidence collection. Karen Westfield would not be prosecuted for a single count of vandalism. That would be insufficient justice for the harm she had caused. I needed to document a pattern of discriminatory behavior, harassment, and possibly financial misconduct. The bathroom door now held a detailed timeline board. Red string connected photographed violation notices with dates and property addresses. A clear pattern emerged. Families with children received 340% more citations than childless households. Elderly residents faced aggressive enforcement of lawn maintenance standards despite physical limitations. The only Hispanic family before the Martinezes had moved away after 6 months of what the timeline revealed as systematic harassment, disguised as rule enforcement. I requested public records of HOA financial documents through an anonymous legal proxy. The resulting files revealed concerning irregularities. Under Karen's leadership, the association had accumulated a significant reserve fund, far exceeding recommended amounts for a neighborhood our size. Yet maintenance of common areas had been repeatedly deferred. More troubling were the consulting fees paid to a property management company sharing an address with Karen's sister's business. Next came the human element. I identified 7 former Maple Creek residents who had sold their homes under pressure from excessive HOA citations. My badge granted me access that neighbors had been denied, though I was careful to frame my inquiries as part of a broader investigation rather than targeting Karen specifically. "We just could not take it anymore," explained Alina Jenkins, an elderly widow who had sold her home of 30 years after receiving weekly citations for her excessive rose garden. "My husband planted those roses. After he died, they were my comfort. But she measured them with a ruler and said they exceeded the height restriction by 2 inches. The Jenkins case exemplified Karen's tactics. Initial reasonable-sounding citations escalated to daily fines. When Alina requested accommodation due to arthritis limiting her gardening abilities, Karen rejected the request with a formal letter stating that personal limitations do not exempt homeowners from community standards. I met former residents for coffee in neighboring towns, their voices still hushed from habit even though Karen's authority no longer reached them. They shared photographs, kept violation notices as evidence, forwarded email chains documenting their attempts to comply or request reasonable accommodations. One by one, they entrusted me with their stories, often expressing guilt for not standing against the injustice sooner. "We should have fought harder," admitted Robert Chen, whose family had endured 6 months of citations for their ethnic vegetable garden before relocating. "But she had the board wrapped around her finger, and we just wanted peace for our children." The investigation nearly collapsed when Karen herself appeared at my door unannounced one Thursday evening. I had just finished pinning new evidence to my timeline board when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I recognized her distinctive silhouette, clipboard in hand. My heart pounded as I hastily closed the office door, mentally calculating whether she might have glimpsed anything through my windows. I opened the front door with deliberate casualness, maintaining the persona of a minimally involved neighbor she had largely ignored. "Detective Sanders," she greeted me with the artificial warmth she reserved for residents she considered valuable to her power structure. "I have the quarterly assessment documents requiring your signature. The board voted on a special assessment for repaving the community center parking lot." Her eyes darted past me, scanning my entryway with the practiced assessment of someone accustomed to finding violations. I positioned myself to block her view of the hallway leading to my evidence-filled office. "Thank you," I replied, accepting the documents without inviting her inside. "I will review these and return them tomorrow." "You must sign immediately," she insisted. "The deadline for submission is tonight." Her foot edged forward, clearly intending to enter my home. I held my ground, leveraging my height advantage. I never sign legal documents without reading them thoroughly first. Professional habit. I smiled without warmth. "I am sure you understand the importance of proper procedure." Something in my tone must have registered because she withdrew her foot, her smile tightening. "Of course. You can leave them in my mailbox before 9 p.m. She turned to leave, then paused. "By the way, have you heard anything official about that unfortunate graffiti incident down the street? As HOA president, I should be informed of any criminal activity affecting our property values." "The investigation is ongoing," I replied neutrally. "I expect there will be significant developments soon." She nodded and departed, unaware that she had just spoken to the person who would dismantle her reign of terror with the same methodical precision with which I had built cases against the most notorious vandals in the city. Each revelation deepened my resolve to ensure justice would be comprehensive, addressing not just the hateful vandalism, but the years of systematic discrimination and financial misconduct that had terrorized an entire community under the guise of maintaining standards. Building a case against Karen required more than evidence. It demanded a strategic alliance of authorities and advocates who could address the multiple dimensions of her misconduct. My years in law enforcement had taught me that true justice requires collaboration across systems. I began methodically assembling the team that would finally hold Karen Westfield accountable. My first call was to the Disability Rights Alliance, a nonprofit legal advocacy organization downtown. The conference room filled with determined attorneys and advocates as I presented my preliminary evidence file documenting the harassment of the Martinez family. Patricia Nolan, their lead housing rights attorney, reviewed the violation notices with growing concern. "These accessibility modifications are clearly protected under federal law," she confirmed, spreading photographs across the table. "The Fair Housing Act explicitly prohibits discrimination based on disability, including refusing reasonable modifications necessary for equal use and enjoyment of the property." Patricia committed her organization to representing the Martinez family pro bono, but her contribution extended beyond legal representation. This case represents a pattern we see repeatedly across the region. Homeowners associations operating as if federal civil rights laws do not apply to them. We need to make an example here. My next meeting took place in the basement cafeteria of the police headquarters, away from curious eyes. Captain Reynolds from the Financial Crimes Division reviewed the HOA financial records I had obtained, his expression darkening with each page turn. If these consulting fees are being funneled to a relative's company without disclosure, that constitutes fraud, he explained, circling figures with his pen. And these excessive fines being collected without proper documentation of how they are allocated, that raises serious questions about potential embezzlement. Reynolds agreed to open a parallel financial investigation, working quietly until we were ready to move publicly. Build your vandalism and harassment case, he advised. We will follow the money trail and see where it leads. Perhaps most surprisingly, 3 current HOA board members requested a secret meeting at a coffee shop 20 miles from our neighborhood. They arrived separately, checking over their shoulders with the nervous energy of informants in a mob investigation. We never approved half of these violation notices, confessed Diane Walker, the board secretary, sliding a folder across the table. Karen issues them unilaterally and only reports the outcomes to the board after residents have complied or moved away. Michael Tanner, the treasurer, appeared physically ill as he described discovering financial discrepancies. When I questioned certain expenditures, she threatened to expose my son's past substance abuse issues to the neighborhood. He has been clean for years, but the shame would devastate him. The third board member, James Liu, had documented meeting minutes showing how Karen systematically overrode board decisions. She has been operating as a dictator, not a president. We were too afraid to challenge her until we saw what she did to that poor child's home. Their testimony completed a crucial piece of the puzzle, demonstrating that Karen's actions violated not just external laws, but the HOA's own governance procedures. I provided them with secure methods to communicate evidence without risking exposure, knowing Karen monitored board members' activities closely. My final strategic ally came from city government. The Housing Compliance Office reviewed my documentation of denied accessibility accommodations with increasing alarm. Inspector Rodriguez identified multiple violations of municipal codes designed to protect disabled residents. These denials constitute a pattern of discrimination that violates both federal and local regulations, Rodriguez confirmed, adding official city letterhead to our growing arsenal of enforcement tools. We can issue compliance orders that supersede HOA restrictions when civil rights are at stake. Throughout these meetings, I maintained absolute discretion, aware that premature exposure could allow Karen to destroy evidence or intimidate witnesses further. Each ally brought unique authority and perspective to the case, transforming what might have been handled as a simple vandalism incident into a comprehensive accountability plan, addressing years of systematic discrimination and abuse of power. The Martinez family knew only that I was building a case regarding the vandalism itself. I had not yet shared the full scope of my investigation or the coalition forming to support them. Their trust was a responsibility I carried carefully, knowing that they had suffered enough public humiliation already. Justice would come, not through vigilante action or public shamming, but through the methodical application of law and community standards, the very weapons Karen had perverted for her own purposes. As our alliance solidified, a strategy emerged for confronting Karen in a forum she could not control or manipulate: the quarterly HOA meeting, where she planned to formally demand removal of all the Martinez family's accessibility features. The stage was set for a public reckoning that would transform our neighborhood forever. The community center parking lot filled to capacity 30 minutes before the quarterly HOA meeting was scheduled to begin. Word had spread that Karen planned to take decisive action against the unauthorized structures at the Martinez property. Neighbors who had remained silent for years arrived early, drawn by the promise of conflict from which they could maintain safe distance. Karen had strategically scheduled the meeting for 7:00 p.m. on a Tuesday, a time when working parents struggled to attend. Despite this, the Martinez family arrived together, Carlos guiding Miguel's wheelchair to the accessible entrance Karen had fought against installing the previous year. Maria clutched a folder containing their approved modification permits, though her trembling hands betrayed her anxiety about the coming confrontation. I arrived last, parking my unmarked police vehicle directly in front of the entrance. Rather than my usual casual attire, I wore my formal department uniform complete with badges and commendations. The weight of my service weapon at my hip provided a reminder of the authority I rarely displayed in this neighborhood. Beside me walked Patricia Nolan from the Disability Rights Alliance, Inspector Rodriguez from Housing Compliance, and Captain Reynolds carrying a briefcase of financial documentation. The meeting room fell silent as we entered together. Karen stood at the podium, her agenda projected on the wall behind her. The first item listed, Enforcement Action, Martinez Property Violations. Her expression flickered between confusion and annoyance at my formal appearance, though she quickly recovered her composure. "Welcome, residents of Maple Creek Estates," Karen began, her voice carrying the practiced authority of someone unaccustomed to challenge. "Before we address new business, we must resolve ongoing violations threatening our community standards and property values." She clicked to a slide showing the Martinez home, red circles highlighting the wheelchair ramp, sensory garden elements, and textured walkways. These unauthorized structures were installed without proper approval and must be removed within 7 days or daily fines will be assessed. Carlos Martinez half rose from his seat, the permit documents clutched in his hand, but I placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder as I stood. The room shifted their attention to me as I moved deliberately toward the front of the room. "Point of order," I stated clearly, my voice carrying the authority developed through years of courtroom testimony. "Before we proceed with this agenda item, I request recognition." Karen frowned. "Detective Sanders, community members may address concerns during the open comment period after official business is concluded." I continued forward until I stood directly before the podium. "I am not speaking as a community member tonight." I removed my official identification and held it visible for the room. "I am speaking as Chief Investigator of Graffiti Crimes for the County Police Department, and I am here on official business regarding a hate crime committed in this community." The room erupted in whispers as I connected my laptop to the projector, replacing Karen's presentation with security footage from the Martinez home. Karen stepped back from the podium, her face draining of color as I took her place. On April 15th at approximately 2:13 a.m., a perpetrator approached the Martinez residence and defaced their property with a slur targeting their disabled child. I played the enhanced security footage showing the hooded figure approaching the door, spray can in hand. Through professional analysis of this footage, the perpetrator has been positively identified. The enhanced image froze on the frame capturing Karen's distinctive profile illuminated by streetlight. Gasps echoed through the room as recognition spread. Karen began shaking her head, her mouth opening to protest, but no words emerged. "Ms. Westfield, this act constitutes criminal vandalism, property damage, and a hate crime targeting a protected class. But this investigation has revealed much more." I nodded to my colleagues, who distributed evidence packets to board members. "We have documented a pattern of discriminatory enforcement, financial irregularities, and violations of federal housing law." Inspector Rodriguez stepped forward. The City Housing Authority is issuing immediate cease and desist orders regarding the HOA's discriminatory practices against protected classes, including disabled residents. Patricia Nolan addressed the board directly. The Disability Rights Alliance has prepared legal action addressing multiple violations of the Americans with Disabilities Act and Fair Housing Law. We are prepared to file tomorrow unless immediate corrective action is taken. Captain Reynolds opened his briefcase. Financial Crimes Division has identified concerning irregularities in HOA accounting practices and is opening a formal investigation into potential embezzlement and fraud. Karen finally found her voice, though it emerged as a desperate squeak rather than her usual commanding tone. "This is absurd. You have no proof that I clicked to the next slide showing lab analysis results. The paint used in the vandalism matches an open can found in your garage during execution of a search warrant this morning. The distinctive application pattern matches samples we collected, and your movements on camera are consistent with your distinctive gait pattern, confirmed by multiple witnesses." The board members, emboldened by the official presence and undeniable evidence, found their collective courage. Michael Tanner, the treasurer who had secretly met with me, stood abruptly. "I move for immediate suspension of Karen Westfield from her position pending criminal investigation," he announced, his voice gaining strength with each word. "All in favor?" Hands rose across the room in unanimous agreement. The board secretary recorded the motion while Karen stood frozen, watching her carefully constructed power structure collapse around her. As city officials served her with formal notices of investigation, the community witnessed justice unfolding in real time, years of silent fear breaking with each revealed document. Karen Westfield left the community center in the back of a patrol car that evening, charged with criminal vandalism, property damage, and commission of a hate crime. The investigation expanded over the following weeks, resulting in additional charges of financial fraud, embezzlement of HOA funds, and multiple civil rights violations. Her reign of terror ended not with a dramatic confrontation, but with the quiet efficiency of the legal system she had manipulated for so long. The criminal proceedings concluded with Karen accepting a plea agreement rather than facing trial. 3 felony convictions ensured she would never again hold position of authority in any community organization. The financial restitution order required her to repay over $200,000 in misappropriated HOA funds and personal damages to families targeted by her discrimination. Most significantly, the court mandated that she complete 500 hours of community service at a rehabilitation center serving disabled children. Justice through legal channels provided formal closure, but the true healing began in more personal ways. The Saturday following Karen's arrest, I arrived at the Martinez home to find Carlos setting up a pressure washer to remove the last traces of paint from their front door. Before he could begin, a truck pulled up carrying the Peterson family from across the street. "We brought paint," announced Mr. Peterson, lifting 5 gallons from his truck bed. "Not just to cover that awful word, but enough to redo your whole house in whatever color Miguel wants." Another car arrived, then another. Within an hour, nearly 30 neighbors gathered on the Martinez lawn, carrying paint supplies, gardening tools, and prepared food. People who had remained silent during years of harassment now stepped forward to repair both physical damage and community bonds. Miguel selected a bright blue for their front door, a shade that matched his favorite superhero costume. Children who had previously been kept away by parents fearing Karen's retribution now crowded around his wheelchair. fascinated by the specialized controls and eager to include him in their games. "This is what community should be," Maria whispered to me, wiping tears as she watched her son laugh for the first time since the vandalism. "Not enforced sameness, but celebrating our differences and supporting each other." The restoration project extended beyond repairing damage to creating genuine inclusion. 3 families installed wheelchair ramps at their own homes, specifically so Miguel could visit independently. The community garden, previously restricted to approved plants only, became a vibrant collection of vegetables, flowers, and sensory plants selected by residents of all ages and abilities. The HOA itself underwent complete restructuring. I helped draft new bylaws that established clear anti-discrimination provisions and reasonable accommodation procedures. The Architectural Review Committee now included representation from disabled residents, ensuring accessibility would never again be sacrificed for aesthetic uniformity. Financial transparency measures prevented future misuse of community funds. 6 months after the confrontation, I stood on my porch watching Miguel navigate independently down the street toward the community park. The same location where Karen had once cited his family for unauthorized gathering, now hosted an adaptive sports day organized by neighbors. Children of various abilities played together on equipment designed for universal access. Miguel paused his wheelchair beside my walkway. "Mom says you are the one who caught the paint lady," he said, his voice carrying the direct honesty of childhood. "Thank you for making her stop being mean to us." I knelt to meet his eye level. The real change happened because this community finally remembered what matters most, not perfect lawns or identical houses, but caring for each other. As I watched him continue toward the park, I reflected on how silence enables prejudice while collective action creates lasting change. Our community had discovered its strength not through uniformity, but through protecting its most vulnerable members. A hate crime intended to exclude had instead become the catalyst for genuine neighborhood solidarity built on respect rather than rules. The graffiti case that began with red paint spelling hatred had transformed into something I had never experienced in my professional career. A community literally rebuilding itself, replacing rigid conformity with compassionate inclusion, and discovering that true neighborhood safety comes not from excluding difference but from celebrating it.